Hey everyone, it's AfroThuz here with a deck tech for a deck that hopefully will be looking pretty good post-rotation. We're talking about Izzet Wizards, and in particular looking to build around the card Naban, Dean of Iteration. So let's start by looking at the card Naban, Dean of Iteration. Naban is a 2 mana, that's 1 and a blue, legendary human wizard, which is a 2/1, which has the text: if a wizard entering the battlefield under your control causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Now we've seen that ability before in the card Panharmonicon, where there, instead of saying wizards, it says artifact or creature. So I suppose what we've got to ask ourselves is, Naban, is it Panharmonicon? Terrible jokes aside, we need to find some nice wizards with some really cool end the battlefield abilities which we can exploit with Naban, Dean of Iteration. So let's meet the team. First off, we have 4 copies of Merfolk Trickster, a 2/2 Merfolk wizard with flash for 2 blue, and when it enters the battlefield you tap creature an opponent controls. It loses all abilities until end of turn. That's quite powerful. So firstly, you can tap down something which you don't want to attack you, or tap down something so that your opponent doesn't have a blocker. But also, the fact that it loses its abilities, and those abilities can be things like Death Touch, they can be things like Flying, and they can also be things like Rekindling Phoenix's when it dies, make an egg to get it back ability, which can be really powerful. We also have 4 copies of Silvergill Adept, which is a 1 and a blue Merfolk Wizard 2/1, which has the enter the battlefield trigger of draw a card. Now if we don't have another Merfolk in our hand, we have to pay an extra 3 mana in order to play this card, but we've got other Silvergill Adepts, we've got the Merfolk Tricksters, and we've also got Water Trap, which we'll get onto later. We've then got 4 copies of the Viashino Pyromancer, which is another 2/1 for 2, 1 the red this time, and it has the enter the battlefield ability of deal 2 damage to target player or planeswalker. Double it up with Naban and it's 4, which is a nice amount of burn at your opponent's face, but also a nice way to trim or even get rid of some planeswalkers that are on the battlefield. We then have 4 copies of Exclusion Mage, 2 in a blue, we get a 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, return target creature and opponent controls to its owner's hand. And that again is really powerful. Basically tempoing out your opponent, stopping them from being able to very easily build up a board presence against you. And then we have the Water Trap Weaver, a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard for 2 in a blue, and when it enters the battlefield, tap target creature and opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, which is really powerful, keeping it down, stopping it from being able to get back up. And our final wizard is Narumeha Master Wizard. You know, if you're going to have a wizard's deck, you've got to have a master in there at some point. Narumeha does 2 things for this deck. 1, she's a lord. She gives +1/+1 to all other wizards that we have in our deck. And 2, she has an enter the battlefield ability, which is copy target spell you control. So if we shock or Wizard's Lightning, then play Narumeha, we can then shock again or Wizard's Lightning again. That either means that we can kill something bigger, or we can do even more damage to our opponent's face. With Naban, we make an extra copy. Now let's talk about our supportive spells, and we're going to start off with Shock, which is a single red mana, deal 2 damage to any target. This means that it works against creatures, planeswalkers, just at your opponent's face if you just want a bit of extra burn. It's not a dead card basically in any matchup. We've then got 4 copies of Syncopate. Syncopate allows to deal with technically anything that can be countered. It costs an X and a blue, which means the more mana you pump in, the more effective it's going to be. In the early game, 1 and a blue, you've got your Censor style effect, and later on you might be able to counter so a lot bigger things. This has an added bonus of exiling the card that it counters, not just putting in the graveyard, which can be nice simply because it might make your opponent take longer to flip Search for its counter, or if they've got something like a Scrapheap Scrounger which can actually do well being in the graveyard. Then we've got 4 copies of Wizard's Lightning. The 2 in a red, it does 3 damage to any target. Again, similar to what I was saying with Shock, it doesn't matter if you have creatures or not, it's never really going to be a dead card. What's really nice about this is if we have a wizard in play, and we have a lot of wizards, it actually only costs a single red, so it becomes an actual lightning bolt. Now I'm not expecting people to have no cards from the sets that are rotating, so if you've got a few of these kicking about, here's what I think about adding. First thing I'm going to talk about is Champion of Wits. It's a great card for this deck. It has an end the battlefield ability that draws cards and also puts some cards in your graveyard, which for this deck isn't that important, but being able to get rid of your lands when you've got too many of them towards the late game, or getting rid of certain wizards that aren't really going to be good in this matchup. For example, Exclusion Mage and Water Trap Weaver in control matchups. And just getting them out of your hand, getting something better. And in the late game, being able to get it from your graveyard as a 4/4 and being able to draw 4 and discard 2. And again, both times we're going to trigger twice off Naban, Dean of Iteration. To make room, we're going to take out 2 Water Trap Weavers and 2 Silver Guild Adepts. The Water Trap Weavers are pretty good, but we've got the removal as well in this deck. We're not just relying on the Water Trap Weavers, not playing a mono blue version. And because we're taking out a couple of Merfolk, Silver Guild Adepts get a little bit weaker, and we're replacing them with a card that draws us cards anyway, so it's not too bad. We'd also want to have 2 main copies of Abrade. It's such a great card. 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. And to make room for that, we're going to take out one of the Wizard's Lightnings and one of the Syncopates. For the mana base, we start off with 12 basic islands and 5 basic mountains. We then have our 4 Sulphur Falls. These are the best lands that aren't rotating currently for this deck. I decided not to add the tapped dual land Highland Lake to the deck because for us red is just really a splash. We're predominantly blue and we just use red a little bit. Also got 2 Field of Ruins, which is a way for us to deal with troublesome land cards such as a Flipdaz Canter. They also in a pinch allow us to fix our mana, find one of our basics. It can also ruin our opponent's colours, trying to take them out or weaken one of their colours. We then have the Archvarazga, which is just a way for us to draw cards if we go into the late game, dump a load of mana into it, turn through our deck. In terms of what I would put in from the cards that are rotating, I have a single card to talk about, Spire Bluff Canal. It's the other duel that's currently in standard. It's a fast land, which is pretty good for our deck, which wants to start doing things quickly. And for it, if you've got them hanging around, take out 3 mountains and an island. Again, we're mostly just splashing red. We want to have, say, 2 basics, just to make sure we can get one with a Field of Ruin, or if we ourselves get Field of Ruined. And for the sideboard, we have 2 Smelts to deal with artifacts, 2 Negate for control and combo matches, 3 Sorcerer Spyglasses, which can deal with planeswalkers, as well as anything that has an activated ability that we just don't want our opponents to activate. We also have 2 Fight with Fire, just bigger removal to fight against things like Lyra Dawnbringer. And then we have 4 copies of Wizard Retort. This costs normally 1 and 2 blue and is a counterspell. However, if we have a wizard, we don't have to pay that extra 1, it's just 2 blue, which is pretty sweet. And we also have 2 Rivers Rebuke for when our opponent's board state's just getting too big. We can just bounce everything they have back to hand and possibly just attack in for the win. Again, I'm not expecting you to have no cards which are rotating, and the only thing I'm really going to talk about is the idea of bringing a Braid into the sideboard. If you've got a Braids in the main as well, you only really want 1 more. So here what we do is take out 2 Smelts, put in 1 Abrade and an extra Negate. At the time of me recording this video, and at the time of possibly you watching this video, there's going to be a fair amount of Guilds of Ravnica spoilers going around. And what's great about Guilds of Ravnica is that it contains the Izzet Guild, which are probably going to have plenty of sweet wizards, which are going to be perfect in this deck. So, once the spoilers are fully released, I'll be doing an update to this deck using the Guilds of Ravnica cards, including one shocking addition to the mana base.